Okay, welcome to the Nikafit Studios podcast. Myself and Katie are here as hosts, as always. How are you, Katie?
Good, how are you?
Very well. I'm very well. And we're joined today by Garth, the one and only Garth Devlin. How are you, man?
Delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you. So you're a Nikafit legend. Basically, just badass. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm not quite sure. A year is quite legend status.
Well, I think it is. We'll break down exactly why that is during this podcast.
Garth Devlin. I'm 52 and I'm in Nikafit just over a year. Started in the beginning of August last year and have found it to be quite an interesting journey from where I started to now.
Okay, so interesting is a very broad church.
Yeah, it is a very broad church because it's funny how things in life change. And when I started with Nikafit, I think I'd reached a point in my life where I was quite heavy when I was nearly 20 stone when at the start of the lockdown last year. And I had been, I won't say drifting because I work quite hard and I'm quite focused on my work or whatever, but personally I'd let myself drift for quite a few years and didn't really have in hindsight, a lot of introspection. I was just as if I was in rails and you just, continue through life as you do through a lot of life. And decided I needed to take some control of myself, as I'd done before. I was in Slimming World and a couple of other things before. A few years ago, I started running as well. But this time I'd reached a point in my running where, after about 4 or 5 months, where I wasn't really progressing, and I was again back into that kind of, out every 3 times a week doing, 10, 15 minutes of fast running and walking and running and walking. I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I decided, after a visit of a amateur house, and I decided I wanted to join Nikafit. And it helped me with my running. It really improved that. It helped me with my fitness. It really improved that. But the kind of things that I wasn't expecting, and why it's been kind of interesting, is that it seems to have given me more space to think about what I want out of life and where I want to be in 15 years and 20 years and 30 years. And I just don't mean where I want to be at work, which that question tends to mean when you're 20, what do you want to be when you grow up? Mm-hmm. It's more how I want to spend my 60s and my 70s and my 80s and what kind of health I want to be in. And also, to a degree, what kind of person I want to be during that. Because that's one of the things I've found most interesting about Nikafit is that as my fitness has improved and as my interaction with people in the gym, both the trainers, but also the members in there, it's made me think a lot about some of the views I've had in life. I wouldn't have given a lot of thought to things like simple stuff like LBGT. Wasn't something that was a huge issue in my life. But, I've had to think about that a little bit more, and you kind of go, well, 1 second, everyone should have the same, you know what I mean? The society is quite unfair in a lot of ways, in a lot of the ways it deals with people. And it sounds a weird thing to take from a gym and from a training, but you guys aren't a gym. It's more of a community. And when you enter that community and you see other people in the community that, have different lives and different challenges in their lives, and then you become part of their challenges. One of the things in my working life is that I've worked remotely for a very large part of the last 20 years or so. So you don't really have that, one-on-one colleague type stuff, or the casual conversations at the water cooler, as they would say. So I found Nikafit to be very interesting from that point of view as well.
You had Zoom life nailed before the rest of us.
Oh yeah, well, and well before Zoom, I've spent 6, 7, 8 hours on conference calls, or even today I spend 5 or 6 hours every day on the phone.
Actually, you should be coaching us the other way around when this pandemic hit off. My God, we had to see what we do today. Just on that topic, what do you do for a living? What is it that we asked you before, and you kind of said there wasn't really an answer. So can you give us one?
Well, I work in IT. Okay, so I started working in Bank of Ireland more years ago than I want to talk about. And then would have been in an area that would have looked after ATMs and branch connectivity to their main center and that sort of stuff as an operator. And then after a few years of doing that, I decided to move in towards more technical type stuff, particularly infrastructure, the actual main computers that ran the bank at the time, and kind of maintaining those and that sort of stuff. And then bank outsourced, and I worked for a bunch of different companies. I worked for HP, and I worked for Pro Systems and a few others, while still employed by or servicing Bank of Ireland. And then I went to the UK for about 5 or 6 years. And that was really weird because my youngest was 6 months old at the time. And I was flying out on a Monday morning and then flying back on Friday evening. Worked in Leeds, worked in Manchester, worked in Edinburgh, worked in Gloucester, over back, and all contracting the entire time. But what that did is it gave me a tremendous amount of experience that wasn't really available in the Irish IT market at the time. And then I was approached by General Motors in the States. They have a small presence in Ireland where we basically hire people to support the global organization. So I've been working for GM now for the last 6 years. And I'm my job role is an IT architect, but basically I design and help implement and support the actual machines that help them build cars. And as the second biggest car builder in the world, so quite a lot of cars.
Very good. That sounds all very like work. It's all very up here. It's very like at the. Where did the fitness come in for you? Just to go to that point in your life.
Well, that's the thing, because my job tends to be very much office based, hugely office based, and like I said, a lot of the time I work at home anyway, even before the pandemic. Fitness wasn't really a big part of my life till then, and I tend to be very focused. So when I'm working, I work hard. So I can work 60, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks sometimes. If that's what the work involves and that's the period that I'm in, there's no clock watching at all in my job. But that also means that, as I said before, I kind of drift. You know what I mean? You eat when you're hungry. You know what I mean? I've got 2 beautiful little dogs that I take out for a walk every evening, but that's 15, 20 minutes. You're not going to work out a calorie deficit by a 15-minute walk in the evening. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until things that, I started hitting 20 stone, I started feeling that, I was just unhealthy at that point, that I'm going, okay, something has to happen here. And like before I've done that with Swimming Worlds and stuff like that. But with Swimming Worlds, those changes, they get you into a calorie deficit, and that's really what they do. But they do it in a way that I found very disruptive to the rest of the family, and then you're finding out that, okay, well, I need to eat corn, I need to do this and that and whatever. But that also means that at the time my 16-year-old and my 10-year-old were also, if you're making meals together, it's not the kind of food I want to be feeding them. You know what I mean? You want to be eating proper, food that you can actually go from, farm to plate type stuff. Yeah. So that really wasn't sustainable. So when we dropped Swimming World, went back to the kind of food we would normally eat. I eat far too much of it. So, the weight went back up. Yeah. So it's coming to something like Nikafit that really helps me focus and balance stuff out. So I can actually eat pretty much what I want to most of the time now, because I come to Nikafit, I do my 3 sessions a week. I do group fit, I do running, so there's a nice, and I'm very aware, where I would move forward, about the importance of calorie deficit and maintenance, and how one just has to be in balance. And it's okay sometimes if your calories do go up, if you know what is happening, because you know that at some point in the future, you're going to have to, switch that around again. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing I think people overlook a lot, is they focus on one area, maybe just the food or maybe just the training. And unless we get that bigger picture, are we addressing all the basics? Are we addressing everything like that? Like, we can't sit at a desk all day, do a 15-minute walk and expect to get really good fat loss results if we're not looking at the food. So did you, how did you find that transition? Like, did it start with just the gym? Did you say, right, I'll get into the training first? I'm just thinking of people listening that might be in the shoes that you were in when you started, that kind of way. What was it that first clicked for you?
Well, not having any idea what I was doing. Okay, initially it was to start running. So I took a couch to 5K, although it was a couch to 10K, because I was never going to stop at 5K. Yeah. And I went out and literally started doing laps around my block, and try to, do the interval training, because that's what all it is. You run for a minute, walk for a minute, that sort of stuff. Until I reached a point where you could run for 10 minutes, and I couldn't get beyond that 10 minutes. Okay, so it was like, that was how the journey started for me. So it did start with I need to move more, but I was still eating as much as I was before. So, which was really interesting, because I started running in March, and by the time I joined Nikafit in August, I was pretty much identical in my weight as when I started. So all that effort 3 times a week, and I guarantee you, it was effort. Yeah. None of it seemed in one level to be counting for anything. Okay. When I joined Nikafit, my running improved like immeasurably. When I joined first, 10 minutes was the most I could do by the beginning of August. By the end of August, I was running for 30 minutes. You know what I mean? But that wasn't just because there's no running training in there, but it was just more focus and, more focus on my squats and my strength and my upper body and a better mindset. So when I was out before, I was reaching 10 minutes and I'm like, I'm just done now, In Nikafit, you don't really get a chance to say, I'm done now and stop. You know what I mean? Because the coach is going, next thing, you know what I mean? So really it was understanding that when I thought I was done, I wasn't really done, and getting that mentality, which I think is really important.
Yeah, building resilience physically and mentally. And I think as well, like from what I've obviously coached you many times, and now just hearing you speak, the fat loss is what got you into it, but the movement seems to be really important. The actual training aspect is so important for you. Like, how has that changed your mentality in terms of how you approach your daily life, that kind of focus of strength training in your life?
Well, I think touching on your arm, really, what it's done, it's broadened my whole thinking, and it really has broadened my whole thinking. It's like, you open a door to a room, it's like, oh my God, this is full of very interesting things that I never even knew about before, although that door's been there your entire life, I would consider myself a very curious person in lots of ways, but particularly, I would be, with histories of this, of that, constantly, coming up with little weird facts and that sort of stuff fascinates me. And this is an area of my life that I had never even touched. I'd never even looked at. It was like, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a whatever, so that doesn't apply to me. And it wasn't until I joined Nikafit and you start learning from you guys, okay, that you realize, one second, there are life lessons here. It's not just, things here for athletes and things here to get fitter and things here to run faster and things here to lift heavier. There are life lessons in what you guys do, and it does change your thinking. To me, it definitely slowed down my thinking. It gave me time to think, okay? Especially now that I can run a little bit longer and you're out for an hour and a half. And, your mind wanders everywhere, in ways. And because you're running, you can't give too much time to something, you know what I mean? Because you're constantly trying to breathe. At least I am at this point. But it does mean that you do, flip through things that normally you don't let yourself sit and think about. I'm not good at, if I'm sitting, I'm on my phone, or I'm on TV, or I'm reading a book, or whatever. I'm not good at just sitting. Whereas when you're exercising, while your body's doing stuff, your mind has time to turn things over,
big time. Yeah, I would have, like a qualified yoga teacher, I would have taught like a huge amount of yoga in Nikafit before I had my babies. But like that, I think a big misconception of whether it's yoga training is that all the change happens in the session. People come into a session, whether it's a yoga session, a training session, expecting this big change. They walk out kind of going, that's it, and like that thing you put up on Instagram, what, I have to do this 3 times a week forever?
Yeah.
Well, that's like shit. That kind of way. Yeah. It's a funny concept, but it's like what you're doing within that session is building the person you want to be outside of that session, and it's not till you do it for long enough and experience it, do you realize how much of a change that makes, and that's always the teaching with yoga. It's, you learn to be still. You learn to sit in discomfort for a little bit longer than you want to, because usually our limiting beliefs and the things that hold us back are that we don't ever sit with something that makes us uncomfortable for long enough to experience the change. And that's why I think there's such a problem in the world with unhappiness or stress or obesity or whatever it is that people are going through, because the world is too fast. People are trying to move on to the next thing, and they're trying to flick to the next Instagram post. They're trying to feel good all the time. They're trying to get the answer really quickly, but not until you commit to something for long enough will you kind of actually experience the change it gives you. And like you said, sometimes the door is closed. You don't even know that there's all these amazing things behind that door until you open it. But sometimes you have to like wade through the junk, right? Because sometimes there's amazing things in the back of the closet, but the shit that's at the front of the closet is full of dust. You don't want it. And sometimes it is easier. Like I've met loads of people who said, you know what? I did a few training sessions. It made me realize how unfit I was. And I don't need to know that. So I'm just not going to do that again, and that. But you can't deny the inevitable, isn't it? Like we all feel better when we're fitter, when we're healthier, when we're happier. So it's always a path that's worth going down. And I think that's what I love about these podcasts, is getting people like you who have not only, open the closet door, but are like, you're like on your 7th closet door and you're finding like the most amazing stuff. And watching you, progress has been amazing. You just like, and it makes all sense now when you're saying when you put your mind to something, you make it count. I think that's really important for people not to overlook, is that it does actually take commitment, and people see, I think we put up so much Instagram posts and Facebook posts, this person lost 20 kilos and this, I'm like, yeah, but you have no idea the story behind the person who lost. It's not as easy as just come in and stick to a calorie deficit. You change how you think, right? You change how you feel about things. You become a completely different person. How would you say, like what kind of changes in your personality, how you think, how you feel, have you noticed since becoming fitter, healthier?
Well, if we start talking about the weight loss, right? I know people that hate this, but weight loss is easy, right? I've lost weight before. I've lost a huge amount of weight before. Okay, just keeping weight off, that's the really, really difficult thing. It's and that's what needs to change. I mean, everyone can go to calorie deficit for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and you lose a bunch of weight. Okay, and those before and after pictures can look great. Okay, but it's the after picture. Okay, that you really need to concentrate on. So that's why something like Nikafit is so useful for that. I think like a lot of people, I suffer from a motivation deficit, okay? And if you're constantly looking for, internal motivation, it just isn't there. You know what I mean? You'll be motivated when you look in the mirror in the beginning and go, my God, I look absolutely huge. You know what I mean? But once then you lose that weight, where does that motivation go? It's the mirror that's giving you that motivation. So what I started doing, like days that I know, some days are very hard to get out and run. I run every second day when I'm not in Nikafit. And days where it's very hard to run, and I know I'd say if I go out on Tuesday, I've got to run at 9:30 and I don't get out till 10:30 because I'm sitting on the sofa going, oh, Jesus. So on Thursday, rather than run, I'm going to book a group fit session, and I'll book that on Tuesday or Wednesday, okay? So that it's much easier when I know 9:30 Thursday morning I have to be in Nikafit, right? It doesn't need motivation, okay? My past self has helped me by actually booking that session and making me.
If you're motivated once a week and that's the time you book your 3 sessions, you kind of got the job done, right?
But then the flip side is that on Saturday, the motivation is I don't want to do another group fit, so I'll run.
I think we've spoken about it before, you and I, Garth, and I'm sure we have as well, Katie, that the myth of motivation, that people think motivation is some magic pill that they're just going to be able to have. Like, I've been lifting weights going on 8 or 9 years, and I could count on one hand the amount of times I felt like I really, really want to do this training session. I absolutely can't wait. The amount of times I have to drag myself into the gym, because motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes, and you just can't rely on it. And if you're trying to rely on that, if someone's like, I'm feeling really motivated this week, it's like, hey, you're probably going to have a good week, but then next week, what's going to happen? I think when I look, wait, no, you go on.
I was going to say, you would say that motivation going into the gym, and it doesn't happen that often. I've yet to walk out of a session going, shit, I wish I hadn't come today. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You're right. And even if it's a really bad session, even if you underperformed or didn't quite do what you came in to do, you still leave. If you could bottle that feeling, I was thinking, imagine if someone were to capture it and like a magic fairy dust, that would be it. But it just doesn't, and it does fall away. It's like you're saying you're being held accountable by the booking. Like, we're holding you accountable, but really you're holding you accountable to yourself because you've made that decision. You've committed to it, and now you're like, well, if I don't do this now, I've let my past self down. I've also let my future self down, because this is I'm not going to get where I need to go if I'm constantly.
At the same time, Shane posting instas of empty docks.
Yeah.
A little bit of public shame.
I respond very well to public shame.
But it's funny because I've actually had this thought specifically about you, Garth. Like, you're such a focused person that you've embraced it and completely immersed yourself in it. I'm thinking, how did you ever let it get to the point where you were 20 or 25 kilos overweight? But now, hearing the context of it, I understand it a bit more. But when you look back now, do you think, how did I ever do without this? How was I ever in a situation where this wasn't part of my life? Like, where you could go week to week to week and making no tangible change to your physical health?
Well, I think it's I don't like to use the word ignorance, right? But if it's not part of anything you know about, you don't know you're missing it. And I think that's very true. Like, when it comes back to my professional life as well, and sometimes we've got very niche skills or whatever, and you see advertisements going, we need a person with 5 years experience in this and 3 years experience in this, but these are things that are really, really niche. You can't expect people to know them coming in, all right? So you bring them in, you show them, you train them, and you can only ask people to know what they have been shown and what they have had experience and exposure to, okay? I grew up in a small village in Leitrim, where you say that, being there for a long time, doing things a lot of times, you can kind of grow. Sometimes that isn't true. So I left when I was 16 and came to Dublin when I was 17. And I've completely lost where I was going with that.
How you got to where you were, how you...
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so but the thing is, so like I had no exposure to to being in the gym or to exercise or whatever. When I was in the 70s and the 80s, our local village didn't even have a GA team, because there was a time where once you hit 18, 19, you went to London or you went to the States or whatever. So we didn't have a whole bunch of kids to play football with or whatever. So exercise was never a really big part of my life. I went to a Mercy convent for my secondary education. So it had been an all-girls school up to about 5 or 6 years before I joined. So I played volleyball and table tennis as my school sports. So there was never a history or a tradition of sports. And then I joined the bank from the beginning. My sport was competitive drinking, and I was very good at that. So it really wasn't until I joined Nikafit that I realized that here was something that I could do. Here's something that I would enjoy, but also see some real tangible benefits from. And I can see myself as I'm in Nikafit training alongside people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s. I'm going, but this is something that's sustainable. I joke with my kids because I only started in my 50s, I'm actually going to end up, tracking my slow decline into my 70s and 80s, because I'm probably at the top of the hill already in performance going down. But so be it. At least I'll be able to track it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people think the older we get, the more things deteriorate, right? As in, like, we slow down or we put on weight easier. And like you said, there's just a lack of understanding of what's going on in the body. And a lot of people say, when we get older, we put on weight easier and all this. It's like we're just losing muscle mass. Like, we're just, as we get older, it's a natural part of aging. We lose muscle mass. It's like, hang on, I can actually just train, maintain my muscle, build muscle, go into your 50s, into your 60s, whatever age you're in, healthier, stronger, fitter. I've heard so many of our clients say that, like, women in their 40s, I am fitter, healthier, stronger than I was in my 20s, in my 30s. Like, it's amazing to see you can actually change your whole life. Give yourself a year. You can change your whole life. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you look, the way you move, it's insane. And like you said, sometimes it's just, you just didn't know the option was there.
Yeah. Well, really, what I'm doing, I'm hoping not to change my life now. I mean, it's great, yeah. But really, I'm looking to change the second half of my life, And you mentioned before, why did I wait until now, right? Because I didn't know until now. But I don't ever see myself going back to where I was before. I think that exercise is going to be a part of my life. From now until hopefully until the end. Really, you know what I mean? I don't see myself. I'd love to see myself in my 80s. I'd go to the gym. My mum went to the gym in her 70s. So I would love to be, in my 70s and in my 80s.
Absolutely. Like, age is no barrier, and if anything, it becomes more urgent to do it as you get older, just for so many reasons. Like Katie mentions, muscle mass retention, or even building some muscle mass, but also your cardiovascular health, your bone density, all this kind of stuff really is so reliant on some form of.
Let's not forget the social part of that as well. Okay, still being a member of a community, still being, that's also really important as you get older.
Even sort of maybe retiring from your work, that must be a daunting thought for a lot of people. Like, that's all I've ever known. That's all I've ever been. That's who I am. A huge amount of your identity is your profession, right? To then accept, or to have to accept that someday that's just going to end, that's hard. Whereas if you're in something else, that's very much a part of your identity that doesn't ever has to end, and you never wanted to. That must be a nice feeling. I've never actually thought about that. That must be a nice feeling to know, like, I'll actually have more time. I can't wait to retire. I'll have more time to do those kind of things.
Yeah. It's funny with Nikafit as well, because just on your own personal goals or whatever. I was a member of Greystone's archery club for a while, and I had to leave that because I was doing I did a college course in the evening, so I didn't have time anymore. But when I was starting out there, I used to find that really interesting. You went in there, and from the first time you go in, you pick up a bow and arrow, right? The object is to get the arrow into the bullseye, okay? And the thing is then to get the arrow into the bullseye as the bullseye is further and further and further away, okay? That's the only goal, okay? It's from the moment you walk in, whether you like it or not, it's a competitive goal where you're competing with your ability to get the arrow in the bullseye alongside everybody else's ability to get the arrow in the bullseye. And it's competition over and over again. And I'm not Whereas even in Nikafit, all right, the only competition is with yourself, okay, and how you feel that day. What's the most I can lift that day? I've set myself a target of 60 calories today. So you got to do like 12 calories inside as short a time as you can. And the next one, you try and match that number. You don't try and match the 12 calories you did last week or the 12 calories you want to do next week. It's what did you do 5 minutes ago? Match that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what you're competing against all the time.
Yeah.
And that is so much healthier because you can work alongside people. And I was beside Dawn yesterday. I was doing TGUs, and I was struggling with the 16. And Dawn beside me was doing TGUs with the 16. So if I had an ego, I had to check it out at that particular point. But it was my 16. Okay, Dawn's been there for a lot longer than I have, and she's a very, very athletic person. And I'll make my 16s too, and I'll make my 24s, and someday I might lift a 36. God knows. But it's me that I'm competing against.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the profound thing I find with Nikafit, that most people, like I don't know about you, Katie, probably the same, didn't get that chance. We were thrown into a gym environment where it is all about looking at what everyone else is doing. That is predominantly in the culture of a big box gym, where you might just look at someone else doing something and you're immediately comparing it directly to yourself. Whereas in Nikafit, I see people like you come in and immediately instilled with that self-motivation. Well, motivation is probably the wrong word, but it's looking inwardly, and it's like you described it as your 16 because that's a big achievement for you. My brother has come to the gym as well over pretty much the exact time frame joining as you have, and he has the same thing. He doesn't seem to mind or even notice what other people are lifting, which is very unusual, especially for a young fella in his 20s. Like, you wouldn't be surprised if he was looking across the room at a girl lifting more than him, which does happen, but it just doesn't seem to happen in Nikafit. It's quite a profound thing.
It's genuine. We celebrate it.
Yeah,
and we all celebrate each other's lifts.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's important about that element of personal training is that because the coach is very much concerned about what you're lifting, and like we would all as coaches, I'm sure you experience it as clients, really care about what you lifted the previous week, where you're at in terms of your TGU, for example, and what we can do to help you progress in that. And if that must be, which is lovely to hear you say it must be felt that way from a client, that we care about your individual progress rather than, right, we've got a room of 16 people, who can do the most, let's go. That's competitive, right? And there's always a healthy time for a bit of that, but it's like, I think that's probably what separates, like what you were saying, Jack, like entering a commercial gym, you're on your own, you're not talking to anybody, so you can't help but wonder, what's everyone else doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing as good as I should be doing? You're still technically on your own. So there is that nice element, I suppose, of having a community, having a tribe that are all we're all there trying to do the same thing. Yeah. And I do think something you touched on earlier, which was interesting, is like, as you get older, I know I've experienced, as I get older, my values change, my priorities change. What makes me happy is different, So it's interesting hearing you say it, Garth, it's like I want this to be how I live my life because it makes me feel good, right? It makes me feel healthier, happier. And that's, I think, something so important for anybody listening to take out of that, is that, like, that should be why you do anything, right? It should be why you do the job you do, because it actually makes you kind of happy. It should be why you're with the person you're with, right? Because they make you kind of happy. That's the message I always want people to hear, is like, are you listening to this podcast thinking, yeah, something I'm doing is not making me happy, maybe I should change it? Like, I would love to know that somebody got inspired by your story to go join something or start running. Even like when we did our testimonial, my dad said to me, because he said, wow, that guy's so inspiring, because he probably could relate, because he was like, oh, so it's not just all the young kids. Some people have these perceptions that a gym is young people who care loads about how their body looks. And it's like, no, it's like, I care about how I feel, how I move, all these kind of really cool things. So it's nice to kind of hear your side of it and hear how inspiring that can be for other people. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. No, it is amazing. And again, the age thing, like my dad, I'm referencing my family members all over the place here, but my dad joined when he was 73, and he just doesn't stop going on about the gym now. Kind of similar to you, like it's like he's bought into it to such an extent where he's tracking his progress in ways that he wouldn't even have thought was even possible.
I was got a 13-year-old girl as well, and it was saying to her, I was saying to her, Dad, everything you say now starts with when I was in the gym.
Yeah. It's funny.
Or in the gym.
It becomes a reference point and also a community. You talk about the community. It's like, it's something that we're all enjoying simultaneously. It's like, you may be lifting different weights to me or training at a different time, but it's something we all have in common. It's like something that binds us together.
How do you think it's affected your parenting? Have you noticed any changes to the kind of dad you are since going down this path?
Well, I've got 2 girls. I've got Ellen who's 20 and Ava is 13. And I think that very much in my house, I've got 3 girls. Okay, so I'm parented far more than being a parent most of the time.
They look after you.
Very, very much so. Very, very much so. I do think that I am becoming more socially aware in life. There's no question that, I won't say my politics have changed, but I have a much clearer idea of what my politics are now. I think if I was in the States, I'd be a raging liberal, which would not necessarily would have been how I would have classified myself, although when I now have time to think about it.
Yeah.
And I would hope that I now have both patience, although I let my kids and my wife speak to that more than myself, and I definitely have more energy. I mean, there's no question that I have more energy. I'm stronger. Just feel better with myself. Ultimately, just feel better with myself.
Yeah, I think having become a parent, I think you can never underestimate the power of leading by example. And like your kids, like even if you think, like you might think as a parent, oh, I'm going home, I'm giving out about so and so, or maybe you might latch to the things you're not doing. But I think when your kids can watch you take control of your own life and act in a healthy way, it's so admirable. I imagine your 20-year-old now thinking like, my dad works out all the time. He runs, like that's cool. You want to tell your friends that you'd be so proud. So I think, as a parent, like talking to a parent who's further down the line, I just think it's amazing that you've taken. That's the best way to make people around you happy, right? Is show them how to do it. Like act in a way that creates happiness within you, and then they'll follow that rather than trying to. We in
our house we'd be very mental health aware in our house. My wife's cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So we would, that's something that she would have brought to the house. She used to be a estate agent and switched quite a number of years from her. So the idea of there being, how important mental health is and how important it is to mind it. And, we speak the language of mental health, and our kids have grown up with a vocabulary I know that I didn't have when I was growing up, which is fantastic because it does allow them to express themselves, much, much clearer than we would have been able to express ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to be able to, have that atmosphere already in the house and then bring that physical health element into it as well, how important physical health is,
Yes, we talked about that actually, didn't we, on our last podcast with like we can be addressing our physical health in abundance and ignoring our mental health entirely or vice versa. Yeah. And sometimes that's what's nice when you talk to real humans, and that's what I love about this podcast, is like everyone has struggles in some area, right? We're not all hitting all the boxes, and usually when you hit one, the other one falters, right? So when you're really training loads, you're probably not, addressing the mind or whatever it might be, vice versa. So that's cool to hear you have like a nice all-angled family.
I'm not pretending we're hitting all the targets all the time. I'm just saying we're aware of the targets.
It is. Yeah. No, it's been absolutely incredible to watch the journey. How much weight have you lost now altogether?
I would say I've lost about 24 kg.
Yeah.
But I was kind of interested. The last time my weight went up a tiny bit in my last in-body, but that was an extra kg of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have more muscle now than I did when I was 20 stone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is incredible considering what a lot of people don't realize when they are extremely overweight. You do actually carry a lot of muscle mass because your body has to carry itself around.
Yeah.
So that's a huge achievement to have lost 24 kilos of fat mass, and then you're talking about having had like more muscle mass in your body. Even just as a little moment here in the lead up to the podcast, we were shifting, if you're watching the video, this rather big cumbersome table around, and Garth picks it up with one hand.
Well, actually no,
there was someone on the other end. But it is a very, very heavy table. I can attest to that. And just little things like that. Like again, I made a comment, I kind of made a joke about it when you did it, but it is true. It's not necessarily something that you would have even considered doing last year because you have looked at the table and thought, okay, I'm going to move this and it's going to be heavy. But now you're just like, you back yourself to know how to do it. It's just little small things like that you just pick up on.
We're just looking at, I was talking to one of my kids about the progress in the gym so far. I mean, in the last week, I set a personal best for bench press. I set a personal best for deadlift. And we were doing rows. When I used to do the one-arm rows, I remember Danielle was one of my first coaches in there. And I was, had a 10, and she goes, no, Garth, take a 12.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing them at 20s, and I'm looking, the last day I was looking for 22 and a half. You know what I mean? And it's just, you don't even notice that you're doing that, And it's not a coach who's now saying, Garth, you've done a 20, pick up a 22. You're actually, you're doing yourself, you do your 10, and you're going, I could have done 2 or 3 more, my arm isn't sore enough.
Yeah.
So let's pick a 22, and it's just, it's excellent.
Yeah.
That for me, from the outside, is what I love to watch the most. Is that change? Is like I have gone from relying on somebody else to believe in me to believing in myself. I've gone from needing help to like wanting to help myself, and that's something that I don't think people see happen. I remember who was it that said it? It was like the confidence and the change in how you think about yourself. It changes how you think about everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's like. That's why there's just such an injustice for me of putting up a picture of someone who's lost 20 kilos with weight, and like you don't have any idea what that means. It's so much more than just the weight that they've lost off their body. The person they've had to become to lose that weight is the transformation. Like, that's where that's what makes me go to bed at night, knowing that I'm in the right profession, is that kind of stuff. Like, it's so, fat loss is like one of the lowest things.
Yeah, it's very hard to catch the rest in an Instagram post.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I love about this podcast, is like real human beings who get to like talk about, the changes that it's made in their lives. It's so nice to hear from your guys' point of view, which is amazing. Yeah.
And it's the building resilience part. Like, you're getting stronger. You're now looking for the 22 and a half, but you've built the ability to actually, you've earned the right to do that. So you're not just physically strong enough, but you're also mentally in a place where you're trying to push yourself constantly. And it does get to the point with a lot of clients, and I'm sure we'll probably run into it eventually, Garth, is like, we'll have to hold you back. I'll have to say, maybe not the 25 yet, or, but I'm like that with my own training. I set myself goals, and sometimes I get better now, but in the past I set myself goals that are unrealistic. Sometimes there are such reach goals that you do somehow manage to reach it somehow, but in other cases you don't, and that builds resilience as well, because you realize, okay, I've slightly overdone it here, but that just gives you the sort of mental and physical fortitude that you need in life, because things can get quite difficult.
It's funny because you're talking about goal setting. I'm very much into goal setting in a lot of ways. And when I started in the gym first, I didn't particularly have a goal a few times because I didn't really know what I needed to do. So weight loss was one of my first things in the gym, because I'm going, okay, well, I need to get leaner. That's obvious, But once I'd reached that, I never had a fitness goal per se. I wanted to run 10K. Well, that was outside the gym. I wasn't in the gym itself. But I got my first gym goal. I want to be able to do a chin up. I've never done a proper chin up, and I'm now working towards that. And that hits two different things, because if I want to do a chin up because it's a body to mass, or I need to lose weight and get strong. Okay, and both of them are going to help me, to make that chin up. So that's my next goal. So I'm hoping that one isn't too far ahead of myself.
I don't think it is, and it's like what Katie says. It's like, it's not just once you do get that chin up, which you will, and then you'll probably do many more after that. It's not the chin up that's the achievement. Obviously, that's the goal, but it's what you've had to do in that time. So you've just referenced strength to mass ratio there. Like, I'm sure if I'd said to you a year ago, what's strength to mass ratio, you'd have a pretty blank expression on your face. But now you're thinking about that, and you're going into all the other things that will make you better at it, like the accessory work you have to do, the going up to the 22 and a half on the single arm row, things like that. And that's the sort of development that we're all looking for.
Yeah, I really like the way Joey phrased it on his podcast. Like, we train to play, which is kind of the concept of like, we train to enjoy life, right? And like, the lighter we are, the healthier we are, the fitter we are, whatever it is, like, the easier it is to live. Yeah, the easier it is to breathe, to sleep. Like, all these things happen when we're healthier. It's not just to look good, because you look better and then you realize you're still a little bit depressed or whatever it might be. And that's so nice to hear. I
was a very good looking 20 stone person.
That's what I mean. You can be healthy and confident and all those kind of things. But like you were saying, the man you were when you were, let's say, 20% heavier was probably on a path to not as good of a life, right? If you kept going in that direction, because of the little tiny habits you were doing on a day-to-day basis that cause that to gain. You're looking away, and that's what it's not that you've changed yourself dramatically. You're probably still the same person deep down. Your soul is always going to be relatively similar, but you've changed all those little daily habits to become a much healthier person. You move more, you eat well, all those kind of things. But it's.
Yeah, I do think that's actually a really good point, because I've heard people say, obviously our catchphrase is changing lives through fitness, but it's changing your life, not the person. Like, you were obviously everything that you are now before you lost the weight. It hasn't changed you as Garth. You're still the same person. fitness is a complement to all of that. Because I think some people look at their identity as, oh, if I've lost loads of weight, I'm somehow better. You're not better. You're just different, and you're able to perform better in your life, but you're still the same person fundamentally. You still have all the same values.
I would kind of disagree a tiny, only in the sense that I think that life, when we touch this around, life is so fast these days, okay, that quite often we don't know who we are a lot of the time. We haven't had time to think about who we are. And what I found with the gym and with the exercise, that it has given me more time to reflect. It is like active meditation in some ways, you know, and that's time we don't carve out. So yeah, you may not fundamentally change who you are, but maybe you get to discover who you are a little bit better than you were before.
Yeah, I think that's what you're both saying in different ways, which I totally agree with. Is like we're all inherently good. Yeah, we all want to be loved. We want to love other people. We want to do the right thing. Like we're all built the same way. We're all the little 3-year-olds just trying to do the right thing. Like that's what I believe about every single person I ever meet. We all have the same will and the same needs in life, and we get muddled along the way with society, what's expected of us, what our parents expected of us, what our friends expected of us, what's going on in our head, and this pattern just develops. And some people, you know, it goes further, some people it doesn't, but we're all trying to come back to that, you know, and fitness does that for people. It brings them back to who they really are or what they really care about, or like you said, just slowing down, going for a run, having the time to think, meditation, anything that slows you down and makes you reflect, brings you back to who you really want to be and who you really feel whole, where you really feel your true self. And there's so many different avenues. It doesn't have to be Nikafit, you know, it's something that makes you feel really yourself. Like do as much of that as you can.
Yeah, because often you find yourself, if you're not doing that, you drift. Okay. And again, this comes back to my professional as well. I always think it's important to know what your big direction is. Okay, you don't necessarily need to have a map to get from here to there, but you do need to know where there is. All right, and that way you can tell along your journey. Okay, if you've taken a sideways step, which sometimes you do need to take, okay, to get around yourself, or if you're kind of drifting back. Okay, and I think that you know, having this time, this meditation time to actually, you know, consider your life lets you actually stop and go, 1 second, this is not the person, the actions I'm doing now, it doesn't jive with the person I want to be or feel I am. Okay, so you swing them back around. You know.
And it is like, it's great that we're all saying here, like it pulls you into the present moment like nothing else. I find exercise like it's profound because you're in pain. A lot of, like you're saying, you're breathing, your lungs are in pain. If you're lifting weights, it's difficult. You're causing, or you're deliberately inflicting stress upon yourself, which brings you into that exact moment. You can't. I mean, it's meditative in that sense, where you may be thinking, but you're kind of passively thinking in the background. What you're really focusing on is what's happening in that moment, which is kind of unusual in the modern world. Like if you're working, it's very possible that you're just thinking about something else, or if you're in the shower, like these things, you're always kind of mulling things through your mind, whereas exercise pulls you into the present, which is really, for me anyway, that's quite a difficult thing to achieve.
Yeah, and I think anybody listening to this, like, and that's what I sometimes think is like, what is the person who is muddled right now or lost or weary thinking when they listen to this, right? Like, oh God, how do I even get to that point? How do I even, where do I start? And for me, it's always like, write out your values. Like, what is, at the end of the day, if you are 30 now, where do you want to be when you're 80? Like you said, I know what I want now when I turn 60, when I turn 70. I know where I want to be, and you're now doing all those things to make yourself get there. So figure out where you want to be in a year. You know, what would that kind of person be doing right now? What would they be doing? So if you want to be fit and healthy, they'd probably be going to bed early, and they'd probably be looking at what they're eating, and they'd probably be moving a little bit, and write those things out, and then set yourself up to be able to do those things on a day-to-day basis.
Because what I'm trying to do when I was thinking about that, you know, where I want to be when I'm 70 or 80 is, and it does involve investment in yourself, and it does involve a financial investment in yourself too. But it's not just for me, okay? I want to make sure that when I'm in my 70s and my 80s, that I'm there for my kids and my grandkids, hopefully. You know what I mean? And that I will be an active part of their life, rather than someone who needs to be minded and, you know, go over to grandpa and see, is he okay? Or, you know what I mean? Whatever. That isn't as important, because I'll be able to go to them and bring the kids for walks and all that sort of stuff. So it's to be that, you know, active older person, you know, and I think just like having a pension or a savings plan, there's no time like the present, no matter what age you are now, is the time to start making that plan. You know,
change is now.
Change
is at your fingertips right now.
You know,
I think that sums it up. Like for me, that's like, it doesn't matter who's saying the message, what direction they've come from, the message is always the same, isn't it? It's like you got to enjoy your now all the time, and then you'll always be happy. You got to take care of your future by acting on it now. So yeah, thank you so much for coming in and telling us your story, reinforcing the message, the only message there should be, and huge well done as well to where you've gotten to this point, and look forward to watching the next chapter for Garth Devlin.
Absolutely.
I'll hopefully be more than one more chapter.
Absolutely. You've only started.
Only just begun.
Just begun.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Garth.
Thank you so much.